Hello and welcome to this edition of Talktime. I am Paranjoy Guha Thakurta in the studio of Loksabha television here in New Delhi. In this edition of the program, we're going to discuss a person who is arguably one of the best known Indians. I talk about Bhimrao Ramji Ambedkar, better known as Baba Saheb Ambedkar. Born on the 14th of April 1891, died on the 6th of December 1956. He was a multifaceted personality. He was a scholar, he was an activist, he was a jurist, he was a political leader, he was an anthropologist, he was a historian, he was an economist. He's considered to be the person who inspired the Dalit Buddhist movement, and he's known as not just the architect of the Constitution of India, as one of the people who was played a very crucial role in the establishment of the country's central bank and apex monetary authority, the Reserve Bank of India. To discuss him and his legacy, let me welcome the guests who are here with me in the studio of Lok Sabha television. I'm happy to have Dr. Narendra Jadhav, member of the Planning Commission, again also a multifaceted personality, has been an economist, worked with the Reserve Bank of India for 3 decades, has been Vice Chancellor of the Pune University, written number of books, over a dozen books, and most importantly, for the benefit of the viewers, has compiled this 3 volumes, which is called Ambedkar Speaks, and it's really a collection of his speeches, 300 of them, over 300 of them, 301 of them. So one of the questions that I'm going to be asking Dr. Jadhav is, why now? And with us here is a well-known civil servant, a Dalit activist, a person who's done his PhD, which looks at different aspects of Dr. Ambedkar's views on often called the Pune Pact, but essentially electoral representation of the Dalits. Dr. Sekhar, Vundru, currently with the Ministry of Agriculture, Joint Secretary, Animal Husbandry. Thank you so much, Sekhar, for coming here. Start with you, Dr. Jadhav. What was really the occasion? Because you write that, the collection of Dr. Ambedkar's speeches and writings, which were put together under a project of the Maharashtra government, one perhaps a lacuna, if you like, or a limitation, if you like, was that when Vasant Moon edited this compilation of Dr. Ambedkar's writings and speeches, he included a number of Marathi speeches but did not translate them into English. So one of the reasons why you chose to put together these 301 speeches of Dr. Ambedkar is that you wanted a wider, sort of readership and audience to know about the speeches that he had made in Marathi. Was that one of the important motivations?
Yes, indeed. But I think the motivation was much broader, in the sense that the basic motivation derives from the fact that after so many years, Dr. Ambedkar is still not fully understood or appreciated. I think that Dr. Ambedkar, when you think of Dr. Ambedkar in the public parlance, they always talk about Dr. Ambedkar as the messiah of Dalits, or some people talk about Dr. Ambedkar as the chief architect of the Indian Constitution. Of course, he was both of them, but he was not confined or limited to these 2 roles. He was, as you said, he was truly a multifaceted personality. He was an economist by training, he was sociologist, he was anthropologist, he was historian, he was an educationist, he was a journalist, he was a jurist, and he was
the first law minister of independent India in Pandit Nehru's cabinet.
Indeed. And these various facets of his personality are not fully understood or appreciated. That is the basic motivation in bringing out these 3 volumes. Now, you referred to the project of the government of Maharashtra, where Vasant Moon did a very commendable job. The compliments for this great project that the Maharashtra government has initiated, they have brought out all the writings and all the speeches of Dr. Ambedkar, and they are divided into 22 volumes. So the Maharashtra government deserves full compliments for bringing it out together. But it stops there, because the way these volumes have been put together, there is no pattern, there is no method. For example,
are you trying to say this was just a compilation, almost, was it like a chronological compilation?
No, it's not even chronological. It is not chronological.
It is
not
divided
subject-wise.
thematically, no?
No, absolutely. There is no thematic classification, nor there is a chronological order. For example, if you take the first volume can have his book, Dr. Ambedkar's book, written in 1944. It could have a book or article written in 1956. Subject-wise also there is no classification. I do not want to belittle the great work that was done to put it together. But then it stops there. Take the case of his speeches. Dr. Ambedkar gave 537 speeches on his life. Now these speeches...
These were what? These were all written speeches, prepared speeches?
No, most of them were prepared speeches. Now, most of these speeches are available in these 22 volumes, but they are scattered. They are scattered, and the point is this: all the speeches. For example, just to give you an example of the limitation of the Government of Maharashtra project, there is not a single bibliography of all speeches made by Dr. Ambedkar. There is no bibliography. There are speeches in Marathi, there are speeches in English, and they are interspersed in volume 17, 1, 2, 3, and volume 18. Now, there is no method. Now, Dr. Ambedkar gave speeches in 4 languages. He spoke in Marathi, he spoke in English, and few speeches in Hindi and Gujarati. The speeches which are present, which are available in these volumes, scattered all over.
No. Are they all, as you say, some of them were written down. What about the ones which were extempore? Are there recordings?
Yes. Please understand that Dr. Ambedkar was also a great journalist, and at various points of time, Dr. Ambedkar also ran various bi-weeklies. He started with Mookanak, then Janata, then Bahishkrut Bharat, Prabuddha Bharat, so on. Now, whenever he gave speeches, the report of the speech is invariably
in those volumes.
Which has been meticulously put together by the Government of Maharashtra. However, there is no chronological order, there is no complete listing. Most importantly, this is very important. This is the real purpose. Those speeches are presented in a completely haphazard manner. One of the most important things that I have done in these 3 volumes is to divide them by subjects.
All right.
Let me finish this argument. This is the crux of the argument. I have divided them into 7 categories: social, economic, political, religion, law and constitution, guidance to followers, and also autobiographical speeches. Take the case of social speeches. Each of this category I have further subdivided into subcategories. In social category, for example, there are 4 subcategories, namely, first is caste and untouchability, second one is education, third one is democracy, and fourth one is miscellaneous. Now, take the case of democracy. Dr. Ambedkar gave 7 speeches on democracy over a 35-year period. So if you pick up any volume of those 22 and start reading a speech on democracy, what happens is you get an idea about what Dr. Ambedkar was saying at that point of time. Let me complete. Please, this is the crux of the whole thing. Now, when you read all the 7 speeches made by Dr. Ambedkar at one point of time, at one go, back to back, the way it is presented in my volumes, then not only you understand his thinking, but you also understand the evolution of his thinking.
All right.
That is something which is not possible with the government publication and is possible with these books.
Rajsekhar, Dr. Vundru, when you reviewed this compilation or this collection of Dr. Ambedkar's speeches, you pointed out that, his bringing together these 301 speeches brings us to remember the significance of Dr. Ambedkar, who was a radical orator, a statesman, a patriot of sterling worth, and a constant inspiration to the million mutinies in India against societal oppression. So, would you like to comment on the worth, because you also have some critical comments to make on the way it will, we can come to that, but overall the fact that Dr. Jadhav has chosen to put these together and the reasons as he has just put out, translating the Marathi speeches into English and dividing these speeches into specific topics and themes and subdivisions, that according to Dr. Jadhav is where he thinks he has been able to add to the existing literature on Dr. Ambedkar. Your views?
Paranjoy, it's a very commendable project. So to start with, and certainly what I wanted to say about the volumes, I've already published in the public domain, and it has come in the Hindu. So primarily, what I have before me are the 22 volumes of the Government of India, Government of Maharashtra publications. Now, these publications are accessible. They have come over a period of time. They started in 1979, and over a period of time, they were able to bring along the material, compile. Now, I, as an Ambedkarite, as a student of Ambedkar, would never like to be Vasant Moon to be belittled in any way. If Vasant Moon is singularly responsible for very painstakingly bring out every piece of paper,
collecting it,
every piece of paper. There was a lot of effort. Baba Saheb lived in 2 to 3 places. He was living in Bombay,
and he left a lot of unfinished work as well.
And so Vasant Moon's work, I don't think it can be criticized at any rate. And while trying to compile those volumes and bring what is relevant before the public domain, he did a tremendous work. Now, over the period when the compilations went on, we should not presume that it stops at 22 volumes. It's a continuous work. What Baba Saheb's work has been a continuous work with the Maharashtra government. Now, we reach a point in time where we could cull out, say, 500 odd speeches from various compilations. It's not only Maharashtra. A lot of people, even in some of his speeches, he delivered a speech before Pune Lawyers Association on democracy. It was locally published in Nagpur. So the kind of a work that has gone into his compiling his various works is tremendous. Now, this is a commendable project to start with, trying to compile. The same thing could have also been done by the Maharashtra government. It could have done after some time, or the committee can be told that let us do this thing. But here, Dr. Jadhav took it on himself, and he has done a beautiful work. He done the project. It's not very easy to compile, bring all the material, but there's a lot of literature. Now, I as a reviewer of the kind of a work, try to look at it another way. You wanted to look at how we spoke on democracy over a period of time. I want to understand what is the biographical contextualization of the situation. If Dr. Ambedkar was speaking against the World War II, when World War II was to come, the provincial governments that were formed by Congress, they were opposing the British. They said the enemy of our enemy is friend. That they were talking about Hitler. These were the very important.
Which Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose took
but
quite,
Baba Saheb
quite to heart,
Ambedkar opposed it. See, we live in a country, even though British are our colonial lords, colonial rulers, we need to be supporting our country. That's a kind of a beautiful position, very important position he took over a period of time.
In fact, in your review, you quote him in saying, let everybody here and everywhere understand, as between the country and myself, the country will have precedence. As between the country and the depressed classes will have precedence. The country will not have precedence. And when the following day B.G. Kher commented on his speech and said that his quarrel with that statement was that the part can never be greater than the whole must contain the part. You quote Dr. Ambedkar saying, I am not the part of the whole, I am the part apart.
Very, very. That's the way he went about saying what he wanted to say. He was very, very, very open in his criticism, the way he wanted this nation to develop. So when looking at these volumes, there is another way of looking at the volumes. There is a biographical contextualization. Why Dr. Ambedkar said this issue, and when did he say that? What was the background of that?
The contextualizing, the context.
So when as a student of democracy, I can understand the evolution of Baba Saheb, what he said initially, what was his understanding of democracy when he presented a paper in Columbia University in, say, 1916, or later on 1946. What was he talking about democracy? That's a way of looking at it. But as far as speeches, these speeches are not written, prepared speeches. A lot of speeches were, the way he said, reported. A lot of them extempore.
All right.
So there's a lot of
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you what. I want to get 1 minute. I want to take a break. I need to take a break in our program. We'll have time. We will discuss these issues about the compilation. I also want both of you to talk about his legacy. I want to talk about his relevance in today's India. So I'll get back to you, Dr. Sekhar, Vundru, to you as well, Dr. Narendra, Jadhav. We are looking at the legacy of Dr. Ambedkar. We are trying to examine his relevance for today's people of this country, today's day and age, not just the people of India, perhaps the people of the planet also. We'll be back with you in a short while from now. Stay with us. Welcome back to our discussion on the relevance and the legacy of Dr. Ambedkar. I have with me here in the studio of Loksabha television Dr. Narendra Jadhav. He is a member of the Planning Commission, former Vice Chancellor of Pune University. He's a writer. He's also worked with the Reserve Bank of India, and with us here is Dr. Sekhar Vundru, civil servant. He's also an IAS officer with a doctorate on Ambedkar's ideas on electoral representation. Dr. Jadhav, the point that Dr. Sekhar Vundru made, that the importance, I mean, what is the use of a collection unless a reader in today's day and age is able to appreciate the context, the historical context in which a particular speech was delivered at a particular point of time. Yes, you wanted to comment on what he said. Yes.
No, as a matter of fact, I completely agree with what you're saying, but I want to clarify certain things. First is that there is no attempt made here to belittle the great work done by Vasant Moon. Let me clarify that very, very firmly. Dr. Vasant Moon, Mr. Vasant Moon edited 16 volumes out of 22 volumes. So he didn't complete the job. In fact, I worked with Vasant Moon, and many things that you see in the final volume, part of that was, I worked with him to get it for him, and we'll come to that later. That's one point. Second point is this, that contextualization is very important, and I completely agree with that. Now, see the way contextualization for many speeches, particularly Marathi speeches that has been done in those volumes, all the contextualization is almost same, in the sense that it starts with Dr. Ambedkar arrived by frontier mail, and there were X thousand people at the airport waiting for him, kind of slogans that they gave. Then he sat into the car, so many people garlanded. Then they went to the meeting, whatever was the meeting place, where the details of who proposed him as the president of the meeting and who seconded that, all those details. And then in the last 3 lines, I can cite at least 50 speeches where the last 3 lines after this standard description is that after that, Dr.
This Ambedkar, is what he said.
Dr. Ambedkar presented his thoughts, and that's it.
What his thoughts were is not indicated.
That is not indicated. That's what I'm saying in many places. Not all. There are speeches that Dr. Ambedkar wrote in print, and they were printed and released. There were speeches where report is available, but full contextualization has not been done by them. And what has been done, that is not what he has in mind. What he has in mind is, why did Dr. Ambedkar made a particular statement at a given point of time? That full contextualization, linking that with the developments in his life, that is the correct point that he has made. My only submission is that what I have done is, I have contextualized in every speech. There is a small underline, footnote, where basic important thing is contextualized. And most importantly, at the beginning of the book, in the volume 1, Volume 1, I have given a big overview of Dr. Ambedkar's speeches and his life and times, where his life itself is divided into various stages.
All right.
And I have made analysis of, the different subjects on which he spoke at different stages of his life. So that brings up, but that is a limited attempt.
Your expectations were perhaps a little more.
Yes.
Maybe yes.
From a scholar of the stature of Dr. Jadhav, my expectations were higher. The notes that would have been accompanying those speeches, subject wise, whichever wise, had to bring more of what contains in the speech rather than what contains in those speeches. That was my complaint overall in the review, that a scholar of Dr. Jadhav's stature, of his experience, of his worldview or experience, should have given us more rather than sort of assorting them or compiling them, things like that. And one more line on Vasant Mohanji. The first volume, which has come in 1979, inspired the likes of Kanchiram. He picked up one topic called states and minorities. He picked up the appendices to it, and when he wrote the Chamcha Age, he used that. So that means here comes Vasant Mohan, who picked up he thought these are the most important writings I should first bring out in my first volume on Baba Saheb, and they were very, very important. So 79 first volume itself was sufficient for the likes of Kanchiram to go ahead. So I cannot even comment on how the way Vasant Mohan went about it, what he chose as important, and what were already in the public domain. He didn't really recompile them.
All right.
He started digging out what he spoke in the Bombay Legislative Council as a member, and those are the initial phases. His fourth and fifth volumes were the unpublished writings. He thought first I should very quickly put it to the public domain.
All the material that had not been published.
Yes. So that was the way Vasant Mohan went about it. So this is briefly what I would like to talk about.
I want to make a quick addition. He's absolutely right in that. As far as expecting more, I would only say that wait for a little while and you see what follows these books, and you will not be dissatisfied. But we don't need to go into that. The important point here is that the material that became available to Vasant Mohan was not at one go. The court authorities, or whatever the authorities are called, they released it in batches, and therefore Vasant Mohan was constrained by the fact that
the availability
itself. Now he has picked, and you see in the first volume that he referred to, Vasant Mohan has done a great job in the first volume, where he gives in the opening remarks summary of some of those volumes, some of the contents of the book. Later volumes you won't find that. That has not happened. So it was a constrained optimization that Vasant Mohan did, and let me also explain to you, that will also take us to the next subject, that Dr. Ambedkar had given, as a young person, he had given a testimony before Hilton Young Commission that came to India in 1926. Dr. Ambedkar returned with his all degrees in 1924, and in 1926 the Hilton Young Commission came to India. The Hilton Young Commission, the testimony that young Dr. Ambedkar as an economist gave, was very vital for establishment of the Reserve Bank of India, and that testimony was not available in the papers. And for Dr. Kundru's information, that was something that Vundru's information, that was a testimony that me and Vasant Mohan, through the archives of the Reserve Bank of India, located that, and that has come in the book.
Though of course what Dr. Ambedkar said before the Simon Commission in 1925 attracted a lot of attention.
He spoke before Southborough Commission in 1990. One of the major.
That was the first one.
First one he went.
Okay, I'll tell you what. We take one more break. And let's spend the next two segments discussing his legacy. I mean, what I really want to know, that here is a person who passes away on the 6th of December 1956, but the government of India waits till 1990 to give him posthumously the highest civilian award, the Bharat Ratna. Let's talk a little bit about his memorial in Delhi's civil lines, you know. Let's talk a little bit about what he has left behind, the legacy that he's left behind, the persona and the legacy.
About the intellectual legacy.
Sure. We will talk about all the different facets of his legacy. So I'll get back to you, Dr. Jadhav, to you as well, Dr. Vundru. We'll continue our discussion on the legacy of Dr. Ambedkar. Stay with us. We'll be back with you. House in Dadar. I was recently reading in one of the papers.
No. You need to have some information here. See, there are memorials everywhere. The big memorial where he breathed his last. That's in a very bad shape. And Prime Minister appointed a committee. I chaired the committee. We have given us.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about that.
But legacy is the intellectual.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we'll talk about both.
This is for your information.
Sure. We'll talk about the physical legacy as well as the.
Wherever you want to
Welcome back to our discussion. We are looking at Dr. Ambedkar's legacy. With me here in the studio of Loksabha Television, Dr. Narendra Jadhav, member of the Planning Commission, Dr. Sekhar, Vundru, Indian Administrative Service with the Ministry of Agriculture. Dr. Jadhav, when you look at, there are institutions named after Dr. Ambedkar. We have the Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar Open University in Hyderabad. We have the the University in Muzaffarpur in Bihar. We have the Marathwada University in Aurangabad in Maharashtra. We have even the airport in Nagpur named after him, which was earlier called the Sonegaon Airport. But when you look at and very interestingly, recently there was a survey done by a television channel, CNN, IBN, and after Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, he was the second most greatest Indian after Gandhi. You know, that was one of the polls they did. When you look back, you know, he died in 1956. Here, the Bharat Ratna came to him only in 1990, and that posthumously. Many people see, you know, whether the places he stayed in civil lines in Delhi, in Dadar, in Maharashtra, they are, the physical legacy of Dr. Ambedkar is not in a good shape. And maybe since you were as a part of a committee to look into what can be done, maybe you can let us know what has happened and why his physical legacy, we can talk about his intellectual legacy subsequently, why it has not been maintained as well as it should have.
Okay. There are three places in Dr. Ambedkar's great life which are very important. One is the place where he stayed in Delhi from 1951 to 1956. For Dalits like me, for Ambedkarites, that is a Nirvan Bhumi. So that's a very important one. That unfortunately is in a very bad shape. But before coming to that, let me explain the other two places. One place is this 26 Alipur Road, where he stayed between 1951 to 1956, where he breathed his last. The second one is Chaitya Bhumi, that is the memorial in Mumbai. And the third one is the memorial in Nagpur. That was the place on 14th October 1956.
Where he converted.
Where he led a mass conversion.
Now,
to Buddhism. The Nagpur memorial is outstanding. It's very good. The memorial, as far as Chaitya Bhumi is concerned, that is being redone now, and that will also take a shape in the next few years. There was a lot of agitation, a lot of movement took place, and now finally that decision has been made. The third one, which is the most important, the Nirvan Bhumi in Delhi. See, when he resigned on 1st of September 1951, he stayed in this 26 Alipur Road, and in 2003, just imagine, for all those years, the place where he stayed, that was privately owned. It was owned by one of the Maharajas. Then it changed hands. It took the year 2002 when it was taken over by the then government. The original building in which he stayed was demolished in the meantime, but that was taken over, and a makeshift, a small memorial was created, which is in a very bad shape. I'm very happy to tell you that last year the Honorable Prime Minister appointed a committee which I had the privilege of chairing to redo a fitting memorial of Dr. Ambedkar in this Nirvan Bhumi. And I'm very happy to also share with you that the report has been submitted and the work is going to start very soon.
Okay. Dr. Rajshekhar Vundru, just going by the account of what Dr. Jadhav says, the legacy, the physical legacy of this man, the architect of the Constitution. He's the person who inspired an entire movement, Dalit Buddhism. Look at the way his physical legacy has been maintained or not maintained. What story does it tell you? What message does it impart?
Okay. See, Baba Saheb, apart from the 3 locations, there are several other locations or places which are very, very important. An average Dalit who can go around, visit places, comes to the place right next to our studio on April 14th. There will be long queues on the Parliament Street. And on the December 6th in Bombay, you will not find time. You can't see the end of the queue in Bombay. There's a huge number of people.
This is the one in Dadar.
In Dadar.
15 lakh people every year.
And you go to on Dashara or you go to Nagpur. It's full of Ambedkarite Buddhists, Ambedkarites. These are all pilgrimages for Baba Saheb. Now, on coming to the 26 Alipur Road, I was Director in Ministry of Social Justice. I was a part of taking over of that after so many years. I had the privilege of carrying that piece of draft to the owner of Jindals were the owners of that particular place. The government wanted to acquire it. There's a lot of process. The government wanted to acquire that piece of land, and it went into litigation. It went on for a long time. There's another way looking at Baba Saheb. Baba Saheb can be seen in small pictures, or a poster in every home.
On hundreds of thousands of statues across every village and every part of every corner of the country.
Yes, the pilgrimage is slowly increasing. These are the Buddha Gaya. Buddha Gaya is one of the places every Ambedkarite should go. Mahad, and where he took water, the place of his birth, Mau. These are all the places people have started going. It may not be appropriate to use the word, but Baba Saheb tourism. We have an entire train initiated by one of the Ambedkarite politicians of this country, a full train to go to various places, Buddhist places. So this physical legacy or the pilgrimage has started, but we have to remember a very important thing. Baba Saheb, for all the Ambedkarites and the Dalits, he lives in their hearts.
All right. So let's move on from the physical legacy to his intellectual legacy. Let's look at his legacy as a reformer of the politics of the country, of society in this country. Would you say, Dr. Jadhav, that arguably his most abiding contribution to Indian society, India's polity, which had a huge effect, some would say somewhat contentious effect, was the whole idea of reservation as a form of affirmative action, not as negative discrimination, but as a form of affirmative action, whether it be jobs in government or jobs in educational institutions.
Sure.
So you would say that would be arguably one of his, when you look at his legacy, his intellectual legacy, would you say that would come right up front foremost?
No, I think of course it is one of the most important legacies, but that's not the only legacy. You have to see, he was such a multifaceted personality. You have to look at his legacy in every field to which he applied his mind. Let me talk about something which is not talked about. Two areas of his intellectual legacy. One is economics, and the second one is women's empowerment. Both of these areas are not normally associated with Dr. Ambedkar, and that's why I think I would like to focus on that. Take the case of his legacy on economics. Dr. Ambedkar was one of the most highly trained economists in our country.
In fact, Dr. Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate, has openly acknowledged the fact that he says that if I have a guru, economic guru, it is him. He has gone on record.
Right. Now, look at his PhD dissertation at Columbia University, which he did in 1917. That dissertation is the evolution of provincial finances in British India. What does that do? It basically talks about the relationship between central government and the provinces, what we call states. They were called provinces.
The federal structure.
Federal structure, the financial relationship between the central government and the provincial governments. That is the subject matter of PhD dissertation. How is it relevant today? It looks like only a historical document. No, it is a very relevant document today, because we have something else in our constitution of modern India, and that is the provision for financial commission.
That's right, the Finance Commission.
Now, Finance
distribution of revenues from the union.
What does the Finance Commission do? You see, there have been 13 Finance Commissions so far in independent India. We know all about the Finance Commission. But if you see, the root source of all Finance Commission's report is the seminal contribution made by Dr. Ambedkar. Regrettably, we know about Finance Commission, but we do not know that the root source was Dr. Ambedkar's contribution. That's one. Second, his Doctor of Science dissertation, that is called The Problem of Rupee, Its Origin and Solution. Now, that is one of the finest books on economics that has ever been written. We talk about the problem of rupee now in a different context, but at that time, now this book is a brilliant contribution that Dr. Ambedkar made, and it was during writing this book. In this book, he talks about, among other things, he talks about what is the ideal monetary system for a developing country like India. And there he took a position, Dr. Ambedkar took a position that came in the testimony that he gave before the Hilton Young Commission as well. He said that when you create the central bank for the country, the Reserve Bank of India, you must have some kind of regulation on the amount of credit that the central government will be given by the central bank of the country, namely the Reserve Bank of India. We recognized it 70 years later. Now this he said in 1926. If you look at the annual reports of the Reserve Bank of India in the decade of 1990s, when our fiscal deficit had become very high and the Reserve Bank of India was used virtually as a kamadhenu by the Ministry of Finance in giving more and more credit, that is when the legacy of Dr. Ambedkar was recognized. But still, it was not attributed to him. We recognize the point that he was making 70 years later, but without acknowledging the original contribution that Dr. Ambedkar had made. This is the second point. Now, the final point there about the intellectual legacy that I want to say. Today, when we talk about the women's empowerment, we talk about it all the time. Do we ever associate Dr. Ambedkar with that? We seem to have forgotten that it was Dr. Ambedkar who fought for, as the first law minister of independent India, he fought for passage of what is called Hindu Code Bill.
In fact, he resigned.
And he
resigned on that issue itself.
Correct. Exactly.
We
don't associate.
Yeah, we don't. How many of us know that women had the right to vote in India long before many of the European countries?
And equal treatment to the boys and girls in the family.
A quick reaction from you to the points that he's made. I'm going to come back to you after the break and talk a little bit about your area, the whole issue of reservation and electoral representation. Please, if you can quickly react to the points that Dr. Jadhav made. Maybe you'd like to add one or two points.
Dr. Jadhav has already he's written a whole book on this issue. One of the very few books which has been written on this aspect. But I would try to look at Baba Saheb's contribution. Single most important contribution for this country is the democracy. The way he molded and brought in the Indian democracy into the
universal adult franchise and more.
It's a rights-based model of democracy, and that is where he picked up several aspects of the American Constitution. 100 years ago, he was in Columbia University. The way he understood the way American Constitution developed. He picks up a lot of things. He understands the Harlem Renaissance when he was in New York. He understands the struggle of the African Americans for their rights, and the entire, even after abolition of slavery, when he was there, 50 years of slavery, abolition of slavery took place in 1913, and they were trying to commemorate or celebrate, and still they were grappling with the issue. So it is not a simple democracy. Even United States was a democracy, but even within a democracy, people are struggling for their rights. So he eventually developed India. The modern India, the modern Indian democracy is a rights-based democracy where your rights you can accrue. You go to the Supreme Court, you can go to the courts and you get your rights. That's what is Baba said.
Can I add something very
quickly because I need to take a last break.
In 30 seconds. You know, when the American Constitution was written and when the people came out, they were asked a question, what is the legacy that you are leaving behind for us? The answer that was given by one of the constitution makers of United States, we are leaving for you as a legacy, a republic if you can keep it. That is exactly the contribution that Dr. Ambedkar made in the Indian context.
All right.
He made our democracy a republic, and using constitutions of all democracies in the world, taking the best of them, he, as was rightly put by Mr. Vundru, he rightly made rights-based democracy turning to a republic.
All right. I'll come back to both of you.
I consider him as the national conscience of our country.
All right, we will come back to a few other points on which his contribution. Maybe you would also like to comment a little bit, both of you, on at least one book which has been written which has sought to criticize him by Mr. Arun Shourie, describing him as a person who's been worshipping false gods. I mean, maybe you can.
Arun Shourie is not worth discussing.
All right, we will talk about that.
On that we happen to agree, but if you want to, we'll be happy.
A brief comment. I'll come back to both of you. We take a third break, a final break. I'll return to both of you. We are looking at the legacy. We are discussing the legacy of Dr. Ambedkar. Stay with us. We'll be back with you in a very short while. Welcome back to the fourth and the final segment of this discussion on Dr. Ambedkar with Dr. Narendra Jadhav, Member Planning Commission, Dr. Sekhar Vundru of the Ministry of Agriculture. All right, Dr. Jadhav, you know, the critics of Dr. Ambedkar say he worshipped false gods. That, I mean, they even mock at the fact that he was his dress code or the suit and tie, and writers like Arun Shourie said he worshipped false gods. He virtually called him a lackey of the British. A brief comment from you.
There isn't something farther from truth than what has been said. As was commented earlier, it's not worth commenting, but if you are raising a question, I want to reply. Best thing to do is to see the statement that was made by two great people at that time. One was T.T. Krishnamachari, who was a member of the drafting committee, and later who became the finance minister, and the president of the Constituent Assembly and the president of our country, first president, Dr. Rajendra Prasad. For example, what T.T. Krishnamachari said was that I have been, he had said that there were 7 members who were drafting the Constitution, making the final draft. One of them was abroad, 2 of them were not well. So the entire...
You're saying he did it virtually single-handedly, almost.
Exactly, and this has been said by a person who was part of it. That's one. Second, look at the comments that were made by Dr. Rajendra Prasad after the final speech that Dr. Rajendra Prasad made. He said, I was sitting here in the chair and watching with great fascination the way the consensus building was done by Dr. Ambedkar single-handedly, and I'm convinced that nobody else could have possibly done a job anywhere close to this, and we are very happy and proud that we have chosen the right man.
All right.
Now, this is documented everywhere. So there is absolutely no point in digging up something, some dirt that is thrown at
Let me come to you, Dr. Sekhar Vundru, on your area of scholarship.
I like to say one.
You want to add something? Yes, please go on.
No individual in this world is perfect. Anybody can be criticized. Even Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar's works or writings, or the way he went about things, can be critically looked at. But how to go about writing or trying criticize Baba Sahib? So what Baba Sahib has done a work, Dr. Ambedkar has written a book called What Congress and Gandhi Have Done to Untouchables. That is the way one can pursue and look at a person or a method of criticism. That's one of, I consider one of the magnum opus of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, when he brought out the entire question of untouchables and the way Mahatma Gandhi went about it. So if somebody, the likes of those who want to criticize Baba Sahib, learn how to criticize. This is what I want to say.
No, it's a good point you made. And since you did your doctorate on the views or the ideas of Dr. Ambedkar on electoral representation, I want you to very briefly summarize some of the key points. Just go back in time, the so-called Pune Pact that was called at that point of time. Baba Sahib was appointed to the Bombay Presidency Committee. That was all European Simon Commission in 1925. Protests all across India. This report is ignored by most Indians. Then he himself writes a separate set of recommendations for a future constitution of India. His work has begun already. But you know what happened when in the second roundtable conference in London in 1932, this whole issue of a separate electorate for the Dalits, for the untouchables, Gandhi himself opposed it, and it divided. There was Gandhi on one side, Ambedkar on the other side. Gandhi's argument was it would split the Hindus into two groups, and the principal battle was against the colonial rulers. Maybe I'm a little simplistic in my understanding, but you can throw some more light on this subject.
Mahatma Gandhi initially opposed reserved seats or representation in legislative assemblies for the untouchables. This was his first position. But after a stage, when Dr. B.R. Ambedkar went about and convinced the whole British government and the way the constitution formation was happening, when Mahatma Gandhi realized that the representation of untouchables or the depressed classes was inevitable, Mahatma Gandhi went on to stop what I call is the electoral method. The electoral method which Dr. B.R. Ambedkar brought before was the separate electorates method.
Yeah, the question would be that in 1932, the British had agreed with Dr. Ambedkar and this issue, and then Gandhi protested by fasting, and there was the civil unrest that took place. Activists like Madan Mohan Malviya, Palwankar Balu, etc., the joint meetings, and finally, fearing a communal reprisal, there is one view which says that Dr. Ambedkar was like coerced into agreeing with Gandhi. Would be that a right?
No, there were a series of events. There was a series of events. In fact, Dr. Ambedkar understood. There was a point where Mahatma Gandhi agreed that okay, let the untouchables have representation, but he was bent on changing the electoral method. The separate electorate method gave a lot of independence and would have produced true representatives, which Baba Sahib called them true representatives, representing the cause of depressed classes. But Mahatma Gandhi went and worked in a way which changed the electoral method. It changed in such a way that there would be a primary election where only untouchables vote and elect a panel of 4, and there will be a secondary election where everybody would vote.
Okay.
And Dr. B.R. Ambedkar went on to analyze this entire, the way Mahatma Gandhi imposed on Baba Sahib. That was the work called What Congress and Gandhi Have Done to Untouchables. That is an analysis of the 1937 elections. See, analyzes it. He shows that when the untouchables or scheduled caste, Dalits, wanted to elect a person, he was defeated in the secondary elections. So that's what happens. Even today, in a joint electorate, if the Dalits want a particular candidate, the wider caste groups who vote to elect a candidate, that particular candidate may not be of the choice of the Dalits.
Okay, we're almost at the end of our discussion. This recent controversy on the cartoons in the NCERT text, do you think it was much ado about nothing? You think it was unwarranted, and or do you think, you discover a cartoon in a textbook and then it becomes a huge issue?
I would, since we are at the end of the interview, rather than talking about the cartoon, I would like to sum up what is the intellectual legacy that Dr. Ambedkar has given us. I think, his contribution is multifaceted, but there is a theme running through all of them. I think what Dr. Ambedkar did was to make all of us ask ourselves one simple question. The question was, it may be in the interest of others to be your masters, but why should it be in your interest to be their slaves? Remember, the problem of untouchability had these two aspects. One was others were looking down on us, and this was happening, or this had happened for so long a period that there was a collective inferiority complex that was built up. That was broken by one person, and that was Dr. Ambedkar. And no wonder he is, for us, next to the God.
Okay, would you like to have a closing
Certainly, I
comment?
like to comment on the cartoons. The pedagogy, the way our academic people go on, our academic freedom is not absolute to pick up anything and put in the textbooks. There was a committee, a Professor S.K. Thorat committee on that. I completely agree with the outcome of the committee. And if the Parliament has raised it, they have correctly raised this issue, even whether it was raising early or late, in whichever way.
Okay, so you think that's not
now
that
the relevance
important?
of Baba Sahib today,
Yes.
it's ever growing.
Okay.
If our younger generation today is clamoring for rights, whatever has happened in Delhi, in various places, whatever is happening all over the world through Arabs Spring or things like the generation next is going and asking for their rights. It is not the existence of rights in the Constitution. It is how you realize your rights.
All right.
That is what is the model, that is the path and the way Baba Sahib, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has shown to this country, and this current generation, the new generation, will soon realize what Baba Sahib and how relevant he is for this nation.
Well, I could have, I guess, gone on all night discussing the subject with you. Unfortunately, my time is over.
Thank you.
Dr. Sekhar Vundru, thank you very much for coming
Thank
here
you,
to the
Paranjoy.
studio. Dr. Narendra Jadhav, thank you very much for coming here to the studio. And this discussion will continue. But the fact that cannot be denied is the legacy that was left behind by one of the greatest thinkers and intellectuals and activists of our time, Dr. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, will continue for a long, long time to come. Thank you very much for being with us on this program.